Moses, deliverance, and the power of God. As the years passed after the time of Joseph, the people of Israel continued to grow in the land of Egypt. What began as a small family had now become a great nation. But with their growth came fear among the rulers of Egypt. A new Pharaoh rose to power, one who did not remember Joseph or the good he had done. Seeing the strength of the Israelites, Pharaoh became afraid that they might one day rise against him. Out of this fear, he made a harsh decision. The Israelites were forced into slavery. Their lives became filled with hard labor, pain, and suffering. They built cities, worked under heavy burdens, and cried out under oppression. What was once a place of refuge had turned into a place of bondage. Yet even in their suffering, God had not forgotten them. During this time, a child was born who would become the instrument of their deliverance, Moses. Pharaoh had ordered that all Hebrew baby boys be destroyed, but Moses' mother hid him for as long as she could. When she could hide him no longer, she placed him in a basket and set him among the reeds of the river, trusting God to protect him. The child was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who chose to raise him as her own. In this unexpected way, Moses grew up in the palace, surrounded by privilege, yet he carried within him the identity of his people. As he grew older, he became aware of the suffering of the Israelites and felt a deep connection to them. One day, seeing an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave, Moses acted impulsively and caused harm. Realizing the seriousness of his actions, he fled from Egypt into the wilderness. There, far from the palace and the life he once knew, Moses spent years in quietness, tending flocks and living a simple life. It was a season of preparation, though he did not yet realize it. Then came a moment that would change everything. While tending sheep, Moses saw a bush that was burning but not consumed by the fire. Drawn by this sight, he came closer, and from the midst of the flame, God spoke. In that sacred moment, Moses was called to return to Egypt and lead his people out of slavery. At first, Moses hesitated. He felt unworthy, unsure of his ability to speak or lead. But God reassured him, reminding him that the mission did not depend on Moses' strength, but on God's power. With this promise, Moses accepted the calling. He returned to Egypt and stood before Pharaoh with a message: "Let the people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He refused to listen, and instead made the Israelites' burdens even heavier. It seemed as though things were getting worse, not better. Then God began to act in a powerful way. A series of signs and wonders unfolded across Egypt, events that demonstrated God's authority over all things. Waters turned, darkness covered the land, and each moment showed that God was not distant, but actively working to bring freedom. Still, Pharaoh resisted, holding tightly to his power. Finally, a decisive moment came. The people of Israel were instructed to prepare for deliverance, marking their homes in obedience to God's command. That night became a turning point, a moment remembered through generations as the beginning of freedom. Pharaoh at last allowed them to go. The Israelites began their journey out of Egypt, moving toward a new future. But even then, the path was not easy. Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them, trapping them between his army and the sea. In that moment of fear, it seemed like there was no way forward. But God made a way where there was none. The waters parted, creating a path through the sea, and the people walked through safely. What looked like an impossible situation became a powerful demonstration of God's presence and protection. On the other side, they were no longer slaves, they were free. Their journey, however, was just beginning. Freedom did not mean the absence of challenges. As they traveled through the wilderness, they faced hunger, thirst, and uncertainty. At times, they struggled with doubt, longing for the familiarity of the past instead of trusting the promise of the future. Yet God continued to guide them, providing food from heaven, water from the rock, and direction through signs that led them day and night. He was shaping them, teaching them, and preparing them to become a people who would live according to his ways. Moses stood as their leader, not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to listen and obey. Through him, God gave guidance, instruction, and laws that would help the people understand how to live with justice, purpose, and faith. This part of the story reveals that God hears the cries of his people. He sees their struggles and responds with power and compassion. Deliverance may not come in the way or timing people expect, but it always comes with purpose. From slavery to freedom, from fear to faith, the journey of the Israelites became a testimony of God's strength and faithfulness. And as they moved forward, they were being prepared for something greater, a life shaped not just by survival, but by relationship with God. The wilderness, God's law, and a people set apart. After their powerful deliverance under the leadership of Moses, the people of Israel stepped into a new kind of journey. They were no longer slaves in Egypt, but they were not yet settled in a land of their own. They found themselves in the wilderness, a place that was both challenging and deeply transformative. It was here, away from the noise of the world, that God began shaping them into a people set apart. The wilderness was not easy. Days were hot, nights were cold, and resources were limited. The people often felt uncertain and afraid. At times, they questioned their journey, wondering if they had been brought out only to struggle. They remembered the past, even though it was a place of bondage, because it felt familiar. This revealed how difficult it can be for the human heart to fully trust, even after witnessing great miracles. Yet God did not leave them alone in their uncertainty. He guided them in visible ways, a cloud by day and a fire by night, showing them when to move and where to go. Every step of their journey was under His direction. When they were hungry, He provided food in a way they had never seen before. Each morning, a substance appeared on the ground, enough for each day. It taught them to trust daily, not worrying about tomorrow, but relying on God's provision one step at a time. When they were thirsty, God provided water, even in places where it seemed impossible. These moments were not just about meeting physical needs, they were lessons in trust, reminders that God was present in every detail of their lives. One of the most important moments in the wilderness came when they reached a mountain known as Mount Sinai. It was here that God established a deeper relationship with His people. The mountain was covered with cloud, thunder, and a sense of awe that reminded everyone of God's holiness and power. Through Moses, God gave the people His law, guidelines that would shape their lives and their identity. These were not just rules, but a way to live with purpose, justice, and love. They were taught how to treat one another, how to honor God, and how to build a community that reflected His character. Among these teachings were the commandments that would become central to their lives. They were simple, yet powerful, calling people to live with integrity, respect, and faithfulness. The law showed them what it meant to live in a way that was different from the world around them. However, even in the presence of such powerful moments, the people struggled. While Moses was on the mountain receiving guidance, they grew impatient. Doubt began to rise again, and they turned to something they could see, a symbol made by their own hands. This revealed how quickly faith can weaken when patience is lost. When Moses returned and saw what had happened, it was a moment of deep sorrow. Yet even in failure, God's mercy remained. The people were given another chance to turn back, to renew their commitment, and to continue forward. Throughout their time in the wilderness, the Israelites experienced both moments of faith and moments of doubt. They learned that following God was not just about witnessing miracles, but about trusting Him consistently, even when the path was unclear. God also instructed them to build a special place, a tabernacle, where His presence would dwell among them. This was a powerful reminder that God was not distant. He desired to be near His people, to guide them, and to be part of their daily lives. The wilderness became a place of preparation. It was where a group of former slaves began to understand what it meant to live as a free people with purpose. They were being shaped, not just physically, but spiritually, learning obedience, patience, and faith. As time passed, a new generation began to rise, one that would carry the promise forward. They stood on the edge of a new beginning, looking toward the land that had been promised long ago. This part of the journey teaches that growth often happens in difficult places. The wilderness is not just a place of struggle, but a place where faith is built, where identity is formed, and where hearts are prepared for what lies ahead. And as the story continues, the people of Israel move closer to the fulfillment of God's promise, a land of hope, purpose, and a future shaped by everything they have learned along the way. He promised land and a new beginning. After years of wandering in the wilderness, the people of Israel stood at the edge of a long-awaited promise. The generation that had once left Egypt had mostly passed, and a new generation now looked forward with hope. The journey had been long, filled with lessons, struggles, and moments of growth. Now, the time had come to step into the land that God had promised many years earlier to Abraham and his descendants. Before this transition, there was a moment of change in leadership. Moses, who had led the people with dedication and faith, would not enter the promised land. His journey had been one of obedience, sacrifice, and deep connection with God. As his time came to an end, he passed the responsibility of leadership to Joshua. Joshua was chosen not because he was without fear, but because he trusted God. He had been prepared through years of walking alongside Moses, witnessing both miracles and challenges. Now, he stood before the people with a message of courage, reminding them to be strong, to not be afraid, and to trust that God would be with them wherever they went. The first great challenge they faced was the crossing into the land itself. Just as their ancestors had crossed through the sea, this new generation faced the Jordan River at a time when its waters were overflowing. It seemed like another impossible barrier. But once again, God made a way. As the priests stepped forward in faith, carrying the sacred presence, the waters parted, allowing the people to cross on dry ground. This moment was more than just a miracle, it was a reminder. The same God who had led them out of Egypt was now leading them into promise. He had not changed, and his faithfulness continued. As they entered the land, they encountered fortified cities and strong opposition. One of the most well-known moments came at the city of Jericho. Instead of relying on traditional methods of battle, they were given instructions that required trust and obedience. They walked around the city for several days, following God's guidance, even when it did not seem to make sense. At the appointed time, as they followed the final instruction, the walls of the city fell. It was a powerful reminder that victory does not come from human strength alone, but from trusting in God's direction. Each step they took in the land required faith, not just boldness, but obedience. As time went on, the people began to settle in different areas. The land was divided among the tribes, giving each group a place to live, grow, and build their future. It was a season of fulfillment, where promises that had once seemed distant were now becoming reality. Yet even in this time of blessing, Joshua reminded the people of something important. Entering the land was not the end of their journey, it was the beginning of a new responsibility. They were called to remain faithful, to remember all that God had done for them, and to live in a way that reflected his truth. Joshua gathered the people and spoke to them with sincerity and conviction. He urged them to choose whom they would serve, reminding them that faith is not just about the past, but about daily decisions. His words echoed with clarity, that as for him and his household, they would serve the Lord. The people responded with commitment, promising to remain faithful. It was a moment of unity and purpose, a declaration that they would not forget the journey that had brought them to this point. This chapter of the story reveals that God's promises are not empty. They are fulfilled in their time. But it also reminds us that receiving a promise comes with responsibility. Faith must continue, not just in moments of need, but in times of abundance as well. The land was now theirs, but the greater calling was to live as a people set apart, guided by everything they had learned through their journey. As the story continues, a new phase begins, one where leaders rise and fall, and the people face choices that will shape their future. It is a time that will reveal both the strength and weakness of the human heart, and the constant faithfulness of God. The Judges, cycles of faith, failure, and God's mercy. After the time of Joshua, the people of Israel entered a new phase in their journey. They were now living in the land that had been promised, settled among different regions, building their lives and communities. But without a central leader to guide them, a pattern slowly began to emerge, one that would repeat itself over and over again. At first, the people remained committed, remembering the faithfulness of God and the miracles that had brought them into the land. But as time passed, new generations grew up who had not personally experienced those moments. Gradually, their focus began to shift. They were influenced by the cultures around them and began to forget the values and teachings they had been given. Instead of following God wholeheartedly, they turned toward other paths. This led them into a cycle that would define this period of their history. First came forgetfulness, losing sight of God's guidance. Then came disobedience, choosing actions that led them away from truth. As a result, they faced difficulties and oppression from surrounding nations. In their suffering, the people would cry out for help. And every time they called, God responded, not with rejection, but with mercy. He raised up leaders known as judges, not rulers in the traditional sense, but individuals chosen to guide, protect, and deliver the people in times of trouble. These judges were different from one another, each called for a specific purpose in a specific time. One of these was Deborah, a woman of wisdom and strength who led with clarity and courage. Under her leadership, the people found direction and victory. Her story showed that God's calling is not limited by expectations, but guided by purpose. Another was Gideon, who began his journey with doubt. When called, he questioned his own ability and felt unqualified for the task. Yet God worked through him, showing that strength does not come from numbers or human confidence, but from trusting in divine guidance. With a small and unlikely group, Gideon led the people to victory, demonstrating that faith can overcome fear. Then there was Samson, whose life was marked by great strength but also personal struggle. He was given incredible ability, yet his choices often led him into difficulty. His story serves as a reminder that gifts alone are not enough. Wisdom and discipline are equally important. Throughout this period, the same pattern continued. The people would turn away, face consequences, cry out, and be restored. It was a cycle of faith and failure, showing both the weakness of the human heart and the unchanging mercy of God. This time in history reveals an important truth, that without strong guidance and commitment, it is easy to lose direction. The phrase that defined this era was simple yet powerful: everyone did what seemed right in their own eyes. Without a shared focus on truth, confusion and division began to grow. Yet even in this repeating cycle, God never abandoned his people. Each time they returned to him, he responded with compassion. His patience remained steady, offering them opportunity after opportunity to come back and renew their faith. The period of the judges was not just about individual leaders, it was about learning. It showed the importance of remembering, of staying grounded in truth, and of seeking guidance beyond personal desires. It revealed that freedom is not just about living without oppression, but about living with purpose and direction. As time moved forward, the people began to desire something different. They looked around at other nations and saw kings, strong, visible leaders who ruled with authority. They began to ask for a king of their own, believing that this would bring stability and strength. This request would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that would introduce kings, kingdoms, and new challenges. It would show both the potential and the dangers of power, and how leadership can shape the direction of an entire nation. And so, the story continues, moving from judges to kings, from cycles to a search for lasting leadership, while God's presence remains the constant thread through it all. Kings, purpose, and the promise of hope. As the time of the judges came to an end, the people of Israel found themselves longing for something different. They looked at the nations around them and saw kings, leaders who ruled with authority, gave direction, and brought a sense of unity. They desired the same, believing that a visible king would bring them strength and stability. Though this request reflected a shift in their trust, God allowed it, and thus began a new chapter in their story, the Age of Kings. The first king chosen was Saul. At the beginning, Saul appeared strong and capable. He had the qualities that people admired: confidence, presence, and leadership. For a time, he led well, guiding the people and bringing victories. But over time, something began to change. Instead of fully trusting God, Saul began to rely on his own judgment. He allowed fear and pride to influence his decisions, and slowly, his leadership lost its direction. Saul's story serves as a reminder that outward strength is not enough. True leadership is not just about appearance or power. It is about humility, obedience, and a heart aligned with God's will. When those qualities fade, even the strongest beginnings can lose their way. After Saul, a new king was chosen, David. Unlike Saul, David's journey began in simplicity. He was a shepherd, spending his days caring for sheep, learning patience, courage, and trust in quiet places. When he was chosen, it was not because of his status, but because of his heart. David's life was filled with both victories and challenges. One of the most well-known moments was when he faced a giant with nothing but faith and courage. While others saw an impossible battle, David saw an opportunity to trust God. His victory was not just physical, it was a reflection of his deep belief that God is greater than any obstacle. As king, David led with passion and devotion. He made mistakes, as all humans do, but what set him apart was his willingness to recognize them and turn back to God. His life showed that perfection is not required, but a sincere and humble heart makes a difference. During David's reign, the nation grew stronger, more united, and more grounded in purpose.